Hey guys, I was just trying to figure out what I was going to carve into this pumpkin because the Enchanted Carving Contest has officially started. And although we have many prizes for different designs of pumpkins, if you want to win this right here, which is the Book of Tiki, you have to carve a Tiki-inspired design into your pumpkin to be eligible for this gift. Fortunately for us, what's better than reading a book is talking to the man who wrote it, Sven Kirsten. He's with us tonight, and we're going to bring him on shortly. Welcome, guys. We are here with Sven Kirsten. Thank you so much for coming in, Sven.
Sure. Hi.
Joining us tonight.
I actually have to contradict you. The only thing better than reading a book is talking to me. No, the best thing is actually to have the book.
To have the book? Okay. Because of all the pictures? The tangible?
It's not reading. It's conceived and built as a visual narrative. I wrote the book in reverse, basically. I assembled the images because I'm a cinematographer. I edited them like a movie, and then I added the captions to give a little bit of information. And then if people are interested, they can read the text. So I just wish every time somebody would ask me about Tiki and stuff, I would just have a Book of Tiki in my pocket and would whip it out, and then here, go look at the picture.
Look at this.
They tell everything. They tell more, and that's how the Book of Tiki was conceived, and that's how it worked. That's how it enchanted and inspired people, because they were opening it, and it was like, whoa, look at all this stuff. Didn't know that there was all this stuff out there. That's, the images are what really sells it.
How did you're often credited with a few other people as kind of like bringing the Tiki resurgence back with your book, the Book of Tiki. I know Otto was also doing Tiki events at that time, and there were a few key players working to bring Tiki back, but generally speaking, my understanding was that it was kind of in a lull up until that point. How did you do research? How did you find Tiki stuff?
A lull?
A lull? You don't think there was a lull?
It was a fucking black hole.
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
It had completely disappeared. It was, I had to, when I started researching seriously in the early 90s, I had to invent the term Polynesian Pop, because people didn't understand when I was asking them about Tiki. Do you have any Tiki stuff? And it's like, what's that? And it wasn't called that back then. So I came up, with the term Polynesian pop culture to sort of define what I was looking for. And the term Tiki for this kind of genre of design and architecture and art did not exist until we sort of started. There was this underground with Otto's Tiki News that I was the editor on, and he was organizing some Tiki events and stuff before Oasis. But the term to define the style did not really exist until Book of Tiki came out and defined it as its own genre.
So
you would talk to Donna Beachcomber or Trader Vic if they would be alive now, and tell them, so how come you had all these Tiki restaurants? And they would be like, huh? What
are you talking about? Well, Donna Beachcomber opened in, what was it, 30s, 40s?
Yeah, 34, I think, yeah.
So that goes back a long time.
Yeah,
and the first Tiki mugs didn't start showing up till, maybe the 50s?
The late 50s, early 60s was really the heyday. The interesting thing is the heyday of pure Tiki was actually very brief. It was from the mid 1950s to the mid 1960s. And everything before that, I define as pre-tiki, or you could also talk about it as tropical bars or something. And Don the Beachcomber, he was so tropical and non-tiki that he never even used tiki mugs in any of his restaurants. That was all a later development when the tiki figure became the icon of the style. And Don the Beachcomber and Trader Vic started in the pre-tiki period, and then Trader Vic was smart enough to pick up on the tiki trend, and he started using his tikis on menu covers and stuff, and their advertisements and so on. And that's when he was almost more successful than what inspired him. He was clearly following in Don the Beachcomber's footsteps.
Do you know what or perhaps there were a few catalysts that changed the tropical escapism to tiki, and specifically?
No, it was more of a zeitgeist thing. Everybody wants to know, like, what's the first? When did the first thing happen? You could peg the Kahlua Room in Seattle as the first bar that used tiki as a logo tiki, and that's, to me, that what defines tiki style. Before, it was always all the other icons, especially the hula girl that was used on menu covers to seduce the escapism searching people to come to their place. But the Kahlua Room actually had a very good. Also, it's defined by the fact that the tikis are not authentic; they're American interpretations. So the Kahlua Room logo tiki that they had outside on the front of the building, and then they used it as a menu cover. They used it on the matchbooks and on the coasters. Interestingly, not as a mug. They had a tiki mug, but it wasn't a replica of the logo tiki. But you could say that one opened in December 1953, but it was kind of ahead of its time. Then the next really important step was the Maikai, and it really defines the changeover from Don the Beachcomber pre-tiki to tiki, because the Thornton brothers poached the whole crew from the Chicago Beachcomber. They were inspired from going there and drinking there, and said, we want something like this. And when they did that and opened the Maikai, they used the cannibal carvings as their logo. And that was around 1955, I think. Also December, strangely, again in December, maybe 54 or so. And they clearly marked that changeover to a new generation, from the old generation of Don and Vic to the newer operators that were using all kinds of oceanic art as decor for their places.
Would because you always hear about Don the Beachcomber having like secret syrups that nobody knew about. Would taking the bartenders from Don the Beachcomber have given them access to those cocktails, or would?
I'm sure, yes. The whole Maikai cocktail menu was a riff on the Don the Beachcomber cocktails. And I always, I'm not a cocktailian. Jeff Berry took care of that part for me. But I always admit that the cocktails were the lifeblood of these places, because the profit margin was so high, and they enabled people to get into the mood of the theme, together with the music and the layered environments. It was must have been a psychedelic experience before there were psychedelics. You got a little drunk and you listened to music, Hawaiian music, not so exotica wasn't always played there, but the Maikai certainly had Hawaiian music. And then you were looking at all these multi-layered textures. And the cocktails themselves were multi-layered taste sensations. So it was a very, intricate woven net that people got captured in.
So I think around the same time that you're describing Oceanic Arts, is Oceanic Arts later?
No, it's a little later. Yeah, they started a little later, 56 around that time. But then they pretty immediately started outfitting these places because George Nakashima, and they were working with all these carvers at the Maikai Barney West, and supplying some of the wall decor. That happened pretty quickly. And Oceanic Arts was my intro into it all, because when I discovered them in 1989, I had looked for tiki desperately and gone through yellow pages, and there was no internet, of course, and not found much. But I went to this place called Benson Imports down in Long Beach, and because I had looked in the yellow pages, and I had looked like for seashell decor, bamboo decor and stuff. Found Benson's, went there, and the old guy behind the counter was kind of like, not very helpful. I remember I found the Covarrubias world exposition maps in the bathroom, and I asked him, are those for purchase? He said no. And then I asked him, what if he knew of any other places that like that, because they didn't have tikis. I think they had a box of like little Easter Island heads or so. But and he sort of begrudgingly told me about Oceanic Arts because they had been competitors through all these years. So he didn't really know. So a couple of weeks later, I went to Oceanic Arts, and I always tell the story of how when I walked in there, it was still in the old warehouse down the street from where the one that had the big auction now was. And I went in there, and Leroy was sitting at the counter like this, and I swear he had a spider web going from. They had, but they had so little business, and it was amazing. It was like Alibaba's treasure cave for me, and then the trigger for me, because I'm such a visual person and I've always been into graphic arts, but I never was that good at drawing, so I became a cinematographer. But that's another story. It was that Leroy had under the counter. He had this whole stack, this kind of stack of vintage menus that they kept from all the places they had worked on, and the art on these menu covers was just like mind blowing to me. And the first thought that came to my head was somebody should make a book about this. And that was like in 1989. It took me almost, the book came out in 2000, so it took that long.
Almost 10 years. Over 10 years.
I didn't even, for the next couple of years, I used Oceanic Arts as a starting point to look for these places. Now I had addresses, and I could check out what was left and so on, and photograph and document it. But not until 1992 there was this cacophony society of pranksters that had these different events, and there was a meeting at Bahuka of tiki enthusiasts, early tiki enthusiasts, and I came out of it realizing that I already knew much more than anybody else. And I just, so I said, I guess I have to be the one to do the book about it, or nobody's going to do it. And that was in 92. And I put a proposal together and sent it to publishers, some of them in New York, and the New Yorkers, didn't get it. And I sent one to Chronicle Books, and I got a letter back saying something like, "It's I like your book, but the younger members of my team didn't really understand it, and it seems to be a little bit too much on such a little thing." And I'm like, that's what's so great about it. It's so amazing. When you go into a macrocosm and it opens up to this amazing field that has been, underappreciated. And at that point in the early 90s, there was already all the retro stuff had been beaten to death with, Cadillac fins and Marilyn Monroe, and it all had become its own cliche. But there was nothing about tiki, and so I tried for a long time to find a publisher, but nobody was biting. And then, ironically, it ended up being a German publisher that decided to do the book.
And that's where you're from, right? Germany?
Yeah, Hamburg, port town, which was an important influence.
In what regards?
They had their sailors' bars,
Okay.
the Riverbahn, the red light district, and they had all these strip clubs. And it was, I grew up in a time when there was still, the ships weren't these huge container city blocks of containers that would unload and load within a day. But ships, the freighters would go into port for several days, and the sailors would go to the red light district. And I always say that a tiki bars is very much, has its origins in sailors' bars, because they were all decorated, with the nautical jetsam and flotsam, but also with mementos from the different exotic ports of call that the sailors had gone to, and they would come to their home to Hamburg, and trade them for a drink or leave them there. They had masks and stuff, and ships models, and there's still two or three left in Hamburg, but nowadays the sailors don't spend much time in port anymore.
So the publisher, I don't know if I'm saying this right, is it Taschen?
Taschen, yeah.
Taschen. They didn't have the same reservations that the publishers in New York did?
No, I mean, it was just lucky timing. But I mean, lucky, it took freaking 8 years. I had been telling Oceanic Arts, I had been telling Bob and Leroy, don't give your stuff to anybody else. There were other rumors of projects and stuff. I'm going to be doing the definitive book on Tiki, so keep it for that. And at the end of the 90s, I was like, yeah, and I wasn't believing my own spiel much anymore. And it was just a chain of events that, I knew. My friend Pete Maruzzi knew the Swiss architect that was renovating the Chemisphere that Benedict Taschen had just bought. And through him, he gave it to the architect, and the architect gave it to Benedict. And apparently, my proposal, apparently Benedict liked it, but also I think at the time, he was looking for material for the American market. So he came over on New Year's Day, believe it or not. Like, he had nothing better to do than show up in my place, and proceeded to go through all my folders. And I had like a stack of folders with material already. And then, well, what else you got? And then I showed him my slides, and he was like, scanning it all in to determine, because the great thing about Taschen books, it's not only quality, but it's quantity. I mean, these books are chock full of images, and that's exactly what I was looking for. Coming from the movies, I knew that you can, invest blood, sweat, and tears into a film project, but if it doesn't have good distribution, if it doesn't get out there, it's
dead
wasted,
on arrival.
you know. And so for me, I had the chance before to publish the book with underground publishers like Research and stuff, but it would have stayed in the circle of hipsters that it was in already with the Tiki News and my friends. I wanted to become a pop culture again. And so I held on until a publisher like Taschen showed up. And the amazing thing is, then they weren't only in America, but they're worldwide. And so I had people telling me they saw the book in Bucharest in Argentina, which is amazing. I mean, American publishers don't have that kind of reach.
No. So you had mentioned, that it was a black hole of Tiki.
Yeah.
Obviously a lot of bars closed, many bars. Do you have any idea how Oceanic Arts was able to stick
Studio
through?
rentals. They were still, they had been, and they continuously rented. There were always movies like Joe versus the Volcano, and there were always films that needed tropical sets. They didn't need like tiki bar sets, but just by importing the materials and stuff, they were able to survive. And then after the Book of Tiki came out, their business ramped up. And then one day,
it was doing really well.
when Bob showed me the new sports car he bought, I knew they were doing well.
So yeah, I only got to go to Oceanic Arts once, and it was right before they closed. And I was fortunate to talk to someone on the phone, and I was like, "Hey, I'm at Oceanic Arts," and they were like, "Don't soak it in. Don't worry about going anywhere because this could be the last time you see Oceanic Arts." And then of course they closed. But I have a mug. It's a mug Tiki mug. It's an imported mug of this Tiki guy holding a beaver. I think it was for the Shameful Tiki Room. But he was showing me his collection, his mug collection, and he seemed to really like the beaver. So I couldn't afford a lot of the Oceanic Art stuff, but that had a personal memory for me. So
I know,
it's
ridiculous that it seemed expensive then, but then when you look at the auction, and I was aware. I didn't know that this was happening because Jordan Rychek kept everything under wraps because he didn't want to have a run on the place and Bob and Leroy get overwhelmed. And but people had been talking for the last 10 years about, they're getting so old and stuff, and who's going to take over, and there were different bids, but they wanted several $million for it, and then nobody came through, nobody stepped forward, and now and then when they closed, like, what? Nobody took over the business. And it's like, I'm like, people, this was clear that this was going to happen for the last couple of years. Did you do anything? No, nobody did anything. So I think Jordan did an amazing job at organizing these events and these auctions. And at the same time, I mean, I've done big books like he did with the Oceanic Arts book and the catalog. My original Tiki Pop book was that size, and it's a shitload of work. And then he worked his ass off getting those books published and organizing all these events. And as it turned out, it was just in the nick of time because Leroy passed away a couple of months later. So, kudos to him taking the initiative and giving it a real, big bang farewell. Otherwise, it just would have sort of petered out. People would have pilfered the place, and it just would have sort of gone out with a whimper. And this was the appropriate, and creating the books was also the appropriate thing to cement their legacy. I call the Oceanic Arts books the Book of Tiki of the 2020s.
That's a huge compliment, and looking at it, it's gorgeous. It really is.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole audience of people that, Tiki is there's a lot of new people coming into Tiki, and they're not necessarily aware of all the history, which is fine. That comes in time. You usually get hooked. Let's say you go to Disney, like I did, Trader Sam's Enchanted Tiki Bar. You get hooked on something, and then hopefully it catches your interest enough where then you go back and you do some of the research and you learn like, wow, this is so cool. But I think there's a huge demographic of people that perhaps didn't realize that a lot of the carvings on the bridge in Adventureland, like those are Oceanic Arts carvings. Like it goes beyond Disney. And
and it's great if people want to learn. Fortunately, there's a lot of people that just don't want to learn too. So, but it's okay. I can only lead with a good example and keep on working at it and showing what true Tiki is, and either people get it or they don't.
I think it's one of those things that it's in your blood or it isn't. Like once you get hooked on Tiki, you go down a rabbit hole fast.
Yeah.
Is there anything, like, it's been 22 years since you published the Book of Tiki? Is there anything you'd change about it?
Well, maybe, I did that chart about the evolution of Polynesian Pop from pre-Tiki to Tiki, and I started Tiki at the 1950s, and then I found out more specifically, it really didn't start until the mid-50s. And then I thought about it, and this kind of separating styles into decades, 20s to 30s, 30s to 40s, 50s to 50s to 60s, isn't really appropriate. And when I look at like fashion and car designs in the 20th century, the styles changed more from 1925 to 1935. When you look at American cars, there were still these rounded off tanks from 1945 to 1955. But then, from 55 to 65, they got these extreme tail fins and got this jet age styling and stuff. And that kind of goes for Tiki too. Like I said, it had its heyday from 1955 to 1965.
So in the case of Tiki, it would be the giant, momentous carvings. Those would be the tail fins.
No,
Is that?
It's really the Tiki becoming the icon of Polynesian eateries and bars. Like used as a logo on menus, and then they had the same style that they had rendered on menus as entrance Tiki carvings. It's all that. It's the graphics and the carvings also. Yes, also the carvings.
Okay.
The tropics in Beverly Hills is a perfect example. Also, just like the Maikai, being the change of the generation from Don the Beachcomber to the younger Thornton brothers using Tikis. When Stephen Crane took over the tropics, and the name says it all. It was a tropical Polynesian bar, but it wasn't even not only Polynesian. It was sort of tropics, all kinds of tropical things. They had monkeys as logo figures and stuff. And when he took it over from Harry Sugarman, it became the Luau, and he started using Tikis on the menus as the entrance Tikis, as salt and pepper shakers on the matchbooks and stuff. And that was the same place. He used the same basic bamboo and rattan decor that the tropics had, and then he added carvings and added the Tiki logo and graphics and stuff. So that's another good example of that style change.
Do you think there was like a lot of, for lack of a better term, like Tiki espionage, in that like a person would open up a bar and then like people would go like scout it out? Because you see a lot of these Tiki icons, like one person might do a cannibal carving and the next thing you know.
Well, I have a rendering from Florian Gabriel that in order for him to get the job as a designer for the Luau, they sent him a couple of blocks down to Trader Vic's Beverly Hills and told him, make us a drawing of Trader Vic's Beverly Hills. And that was like his diploma work to get hired to work with George Nakashima on the lure.
How well can you copy?
Yeah. No, they all copied. They all built on each other, and there was, back then, without the internet, different places in the different states didn't know of each other's existence. That was one of the reasons why nobody put the pieces of the mosaic together to define it as a style until I did that with the Book of Tiki, because they didn't necessarily know of each other. So things like the Kahiki fireplace Tiki got copied on matchbooks for some other restaurant in Illinois or something, and the famous Tiki Bob logo Tiki, which was such a definitive logo Tiki, and Tiki Bob was another great example of the changeover from Trader Vic's to becoming a place that's called Tiki in the name, that has a cartoony Tiki as a logo, and so on. But it showed up as a mug at the Bali High in New Orleans, and as a mug for the Elvis movie Blue Hawaii. And people, I don't call it ripping each other off. I call it the chain of transmission. It's a polite term of
chain of transmission.
The Tiki chain of transmission.
Yeah, I do think there's obviously there's that question of cultural appropriation and whatnot, but when you look at a lot of the tikis in the United States, a lot of the tikis are actually from the United States. You look at a lot of the stuff we're talking about, and it's like Tiki Bob's from the United States. And
that's the whole gist of my book, that it's an American pop culture. It's not a Polynesian. It's not the original culture. And you see how in Hawaii people were much more careful to use Tiki images, and often when they used them, there were authentic reproductions. They weren't, the cartoony. But to me, it's not that interesting, authentic reproductions. It doesn't, that's easy to do, and it's another thing. What made it an art form was American artists liberally reinterpreting all these designs and adding, still, it's very important that it is recognizable as a Polynesian deity or a carving or art form, but adding a touch of modernism and adding a touch of cartoon. Milan Guanco, one of the most prolific carvers that was a Filipino immigrant here in Los Angeles, when I interviewed him, he said, that some of his influences, as he called, were kiddie cartoons, TV cartoons, like, Bugs Bunny and stuff.
That's so strange to think about.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them, they study perhaps the styles of different islands, and then they take those styles or those techniques, and then they do something entirely different with it.
And they did that designers mostly did that through Oceanic Art books. There's a lot of designs that you can trace back. I mean, the Oceanic Arts itself, the name came from a book called Oceanic Art. And a lot of their designs that they were replicating came from the black and white photos in that book, because that was the only access American artists had to this kind of culture. They went and bought Oceanic Art books and then used them as a basis to make their own stuff. Unfortunately, that simple step is forgotten nowadays, and a lot of artists only go one mouse click away and copy a modern Tiki design to make their own Tikis, and then it becomes, it's redundant. It's not. It lacks spirit, in my opinion.
So you then you take a style and then you do something new with it. Do you see a time, like, obviously, you've got an exhibit, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on, in a museum right now. Do you see a time you could go to, like, almost any major city in the United States, and you go to a local art museum and they will have an exhibit on oceanic art, specifically meaning, the traditional carvings. I have one of only three authentic coup carvings at the PBD Essex here in Massachusetts, just a stone throw away from me. Do you see a time where, I guess because tiki's almost considered like kitschy, even though there's masterful art in it, do you see a time when that, like, American tiki, for lack of a better term, or Polynesian pop, whatever you want to call it, would have its own place in museums?
In museums, that's very difficult. It has now. I'm very happy that I was successful with my goal by waiting to get the Book of Tiki published by the right publisher, that it has become its own pop culture genre. But museums, you have to realize that museum operate. The staff at museums comes from academia. They come from ethnographic academia of studying and stuff, and they are so conditioned with colonial guilt now that they don't want to touch tiki with a 10-foot pole. I was very lucky to have the Catalina Museum do this, because there's a young curator there that totally got tiki, and he got the fact that all this cultural appropriation bullshit is going down the wrong rabbit hole, and that it is its own genre, and it's a very artistic and invigorating and appreciative genre for the original culture. It's not cultural appropriation, it's cultural appreciation.
Yep. And it's a totally different culture too. I almost feel like calling it either cultural appropriation or appreciation is almost like a misnomer, because it's an entirely different species. It's
Exactly.
a whole own breed.
And by calling it a cultural appropriation, you're giving it the same importance in the original culture, which is not what it needs. It is its own. It has its own quality, and it's not pretending to be the original culture. And that's why I was happy to do the Catalina Museum show, because it's all about this chapter that I have in Tiki Pop, from book to film to bar, saying Tiki and Polynesian pop is fictional. It's fantasy, and it was made. It was made into Hollywood movies, and then the set builders built tiki bars. Tiki bars, on one hand, it's like I said, inspired by sailors' bars, but a good tiki bar is also like a film set. It's floor to ceiling, like a film set that you walk into your own South Seas movie. And how could you ever? I mean, yeah, of course, Hollywood has been racist in their movies and stuff, but that's history. And to expect Hollywood movies to be culturally appropriate is just, it's absurd. Of course they're not.
Yeah, I can remember growing up. So my dad was obsessed with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, and it definitely rubbed off on me. I love the road movies. Road to Zanzibar, I believe it is. Bob Hope is like wrestling with the gorilla in the cage, and you look back on it, and it's definitely not correct, politically correct.
But they're making, there's a sense of humor, and that's what is absent about the whole discussion nowadays. Nobody has a sense of humor anymore. They were making fun of themselves. It was all, masquerade. They were knowledgeably presenting cliches and making fun of them, and not making fun of the culture. They were making fun of, the cliche and the exoticism that was, that they were using in the films.
There's that song about I forget which song it is, but there's the guy who's on the island, and people are telling him to get a job, and he's like, "Why would I get a job? They're just photographing me on the island."
Well,
But do you?
I have this great clip from a 40s movie in my exhibition with Dorothy Lamour singing Queen of the Hollywood Islands, and she totally spoofs her own role as the sarong girl every step of the way. It's unfortunately, I don't think you can find it on YouTube at the moment, but go to the show and it's fucking hilarious. She sings about I'm the queen of the Hollywood Islands. That's what Tiki is. It's the Hollywood Islands.
These imaginary fictitious
Yeah.
places. Do you have a favorite? Obviously, like you went to school for film, you have a film background. It shows in your books. Do you have a favorite of the pre-Tiki films?
Oh, I wasn't prepared for that question.
No.
It's I'm sorry. It's when you put on the spot with these questions. What's your favorite restaurant? What's your favorite drink? It's like it.
Suddenly, all the stuff just runs from your memory.
Yeah. A favorite pre-Tiki. Yeah, I can't pull it out of my head right now. Sorry.
If you think of it, let me know and I'll post it.
Okay.
I'll post it in the comments. But let's talk about. So you got this going on. This just opened October 22nd, right? Tall Tiki Tales.
Last Saturday, yeah.
And this poster specifically, is that Shag? It looks like Shag.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Shag designed the poster. How did this come about? I know you talked about it briefly, but like, what is the story behind Tall Tiki Tales?
Well, first of all, as the title says, that it's about how Tiki is based on fiction, and this concept from book to film to bar. So the whole exhibition goes along that narrative. The first section is about the armchair explorer that got his vision of the South Sea island paradise through Robert Louis Stevenson, Jack London, Herman Melville, and all this classic South Seas fiction. And it was just so until the 1920s, it was all through books. And then film came along, and Hollywood producers were desperately looking for material. So they didn't only take South Sea travel books, but they adventure books, but they took all kinds of books and made them into movies. And in that process, it became even more fictional and fantasy-like. And then it just so happened that Catalina was, just across from Hollywood, a couple of miles across the ocean. And so several film companies started shooting their South Seas movies on Catalina at the Isthmus. And most famous one was the Mutiny on the Bounty. And they spent several weeks there, and they planted palm trees and built huts and stuff. And when the film wrapped, they kept one of the huts. And because Clark Gable, who played Fletcher Christian, the mutineer, lived above, it was his living quarters. They kept the hut, and they kept the bar in it, and it was called Christian's Hut. And it was very well visited. A lot of people came over, a lot of actors hung out at Christian's Hut until they opened another one on Balboa Island across in LA. And then they branched out to like 3 or 4 other Christian's Huts. So that is like one of the key examples from book to film to bar. But there were others. There was the Hurricane, and there were several pre-Tiki bars called the Hurricane. And then there was, I'm using another one shot on Catalina called Rain, which was based on the Somerset Maugham story of Sadie Thompson. Sadie Thompson is better known because they made several film versions of that story. Sadie Thompson was the prostitute stranded there on Samoa and Pango Pango. So several bars opened during the 40s that were called Pango Pango, all the way from Long Beach to up to Portland, and they had these rain effects, rain on the roof effects that Dawn the Beachcomber also had. So you not only had the decor, the floor to ceiling bamboo and rattan decor, but you had special effects like they were using in the movies to create this kind of atmosphere. And so in my exhibit, I had Bamboo Ben build a little rain hut that actually has a rain effect when you sit down and gaze onto the island diorama.
I've already seen people have started posting pictures on Facebook,
Yeah.
and I've seen a snapshot of that. That looks so good. Do
And
you
then,
think?
then I'm sorry, I'm going on about the exhibition. Then the next generation from book to film to bar was James Misner's Tales of the South Pacific, which started as a book, then it became a successful musical, a movie, and then all these little Bali Highs opened up all across America. And of course, Kon-Tiki, which also started as a book, then became the documentary, went into the movie theaters and won an Academy Award. And then all these Kon-Tikis opened up.
Do you think that the tiki bars, when they first opened, were primarily for like a rich and famous kind of demographic, with the actors of Hollywood and?
No, but they used that, of course. Don the Beachcomber used that, and even Harry Sugarman in Beverly Hills used that. He had a great menu with all these stars on his having their own drink on the cocktail menu, and throughout, even through the Tiki period, the Kahiki in Columbus, Ohio, on the back of one of their brochures, they had something about the people that visit the Kahiki, and there were always photographed celebrities there. And celebrities, I think they frequented these places because they liked them. They knew what they were getting strong drinks and Chinese cuisine. And, it started with Dawn the Beachcomber, and it went through the decades. They were frequented by celebrities, and it was, one of the early use of celebrity culture for advertising.
Why do you think so? I'm from the East Coast. There's a distinct difference between tiki on the East Coast and tiki on the West Coast. People post on social media all the time, at least once a week. They're like, I'm headed to Hawaii. Where are the best tiki bars? And the answer is probably California, not Hawaii. Like, you're going to the wrong place.
Yeah,
why do you think?
It's funny. I try to be very polite, but it's kind of shocking how people expect now. Well, I'm going somewhere, so there must be tiki bars. Let's ask the specialist. I'm going to so and so. So where are the tiki bars? I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not a given that every town in every country has tiki bars.
Yep.
So
I have a map on the website. That's why I ended up creating a map on the Search for Tiki, just so that when people sent me a question like that, I can just say, here's a link.
That's cool. Yeah.
Don't keep asking me the same question over and over and over again.
I mean, the James Teitelbaum books, Tiki Road Trip, was really great, but it's not up to date anymore. A lot of those places are not there anymore. But they don't have to be. The thing of, like, actually the first title for my Book of Tiki was In Search of Tiki, but the publisher liked the Book of Tiki better, and that's fine. And it's all part of it is the fun of the search and discovery.
100%.
It's not being presented on a platter to you, and by a couple of mouse clicks, but you have to go out there and you have to do your search them and look up places and form your own opinion.
Do you think when you were writing the Book of Tiki here,
Yeah.
if the information had been more readily available, would you still have written this book? Or were you like the fact that it took effort to write this book, is that what intrigued you about Tiki?
Interesting question. I never thought about it this way. I just wanted to share my excitement about this discovery. And, you know, now you can't really, Tiki is so everywhere and on the web that you can't create this feeling of a vacuum of nothing being there. And how me and my friends, when there was anything there that had the name Tiki on it, we got really excited, because it was so rarefied. It was so unusual. And when the Book of Tiki came out, it blew people's minds. That's how I found my wife. She had a store
really?
in Burbank, and she saw the book, and she was, blown away. And a lot of the early Tiki artists were, took their inspiration from the book, because there was people had known individual facets of it, and someplace here and somebody's, apartment building and stuff, but they had not seen it all put together to the extent of the way the Book of Tiki did it. And I had no idea what it would start. I just wanted to share what excited me. Like, as a cinematographer, I share my view of what I'm photographing. And that was sort of an extension of that need.
You didn't have an inclination when you were, not when you were searching for a publisher, but once the book was written, did you have an idea like this is going to be successful, or were you pretty nervous about it?
No, I wasn't nervous. I was just glad that it came out.
Whatever. After 11 years, it's like, it is what it is.
No, I was excited, of course, and I was very happy that I could show something for all my work, and I was very gratified by the positive reaction, but I had no idea that it would continue on and grow to the degree it has now. I mean, now it's become sort of a victim of its own success, and there's a lot of crap calling itself Tiki out there. But still, it's better than never having been acknowledged.
There's definitely tons of people that are into it. That's
Yeah.
for sure. It's grown. You can just look at the prices of mugs on eBay to realize, holy cow. But
Yeah.
I do think it's still a niche. It's still niche.
Yeah, it is.
Niche category. There's this, impression that when you see 500 mugs sell out, that Tiki's this huge thing. But
no.
One of the things that I've loved about it is, since I've gotten into it, I've been able to talk to people like you. I've been able to talk to the Tiki artists, and if this was like a big industry like Hollywood or whatever, like I wouldn't be meeting with all these people and talking with them. So there is, it is. I don't know. Do you think the growth is a good thing?
Yeah, I think so. Even like with all the downsides of it, especially, for example, in mug collecting, people now don't come from a knowledge of Tiki and then collect Tiki mugs. They see a crazy monster mug online and think, "Ooh, this is cool," and then they buy it, and then they see another one and they get hooked. And then when I come along and say, "Well, that's not really Tiki style," they're like, "Who are you?" They don't know my books. So, and it's kind of shocking, because one of the answers I gotten was like, "Well, they call it, how eBay vendors started to become the source of what is Tiki now. They call it a Tiki on eBay. What else am I supposed to call it if it's not Tiki?" It's like, you don't even realize that you're being led, like sheep to buy something that just because Tiki is a buzzword. And I talk about that actually in the Book of Tiki early on, how Tiki is an archetypal word. There was this linguist, and I love all these cookie first thing of anything theories. He distilled the language down to the first human word, and supposedly the first human word was tiki. So, I mean, and tiki is really, it is a buzzword. Once you've heard it, it's hard to forget. And so it catches on like wildfire with people that know what it, that have some conception on it, but also with people that don't know anything about its background. And then from then on, anything can be tiki.
I do think in playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, I do think it is kind of like a cyclical thing, right? So like the problem with eBay in particular is if you want your mug to sell and you want people to see it, you're almost kind of pigeonholed into using that word, even if you don't want to, but you want your stuff to sell. So like, it's kind of like, I don't know how to change that.
No, I don't know either. But it's misinformation. It clearly is misinformation because it creates a whole new generation of collectors that think they have tiki mugs while all they have is a bunch of monster and skull mugs and creature of the Black Lagoon mugs. And it is what it is. And the people that want to find out more do, and the other ones are all about you're just trying to spoil my fun, and it is an unfortunate thing that I've become aware of, that there is this sentiment out there that, to quote Isaac Asimov, has this attitude, my ignorance is as good as your knowledge. And you can't argue with that. It's you're just wasting your time. So, and you mentioned that before. I've become a victim of my own success because, like, you noticed that Tiki Pop, the book title, it was the catalog for an exhibition at the Gabe Museum in Paris, the biggest ethnographic museum in Europe. It includes a lot of pre-Tiki, but I had to create a sort of a snappy title. And I also, because it was in this ethnographic museum that had real tikis, I needed to define my exhibition and the genre as pop culture. So, the Cape had all kinds of, Polynesian, Marquesan and Hawaiian tikis, which are not really called tikis, but whatever. And
that's a whole other conversation.
Doing this huge exhibition, taking up a whole floor, and it needed to make clear that this is not the authentic. So I called it, Tiki Pop, even though it included pre-Tiki, but it all, and the same goes for this show right now, Tall Tiki Tales. I called it that because I have to put Tiki in the title to benefit from this interest that I created myself. If I would be, try to be stuck on my concept of pre-Tiki and Tiki, and I would have called it, Tall Tropical Tales. Nobody would come,
Yeah.
So when everybody else is using or abusing the term, I would be stupid not to.
You're kind of stuck with it.
Yeah.
You kind of are. Because I had always wondered why, because in the Book of Tiki, I don't know if you coined the phrase, but Polynesian Pop.
Right. I coined the phrase because I was looking for something that people didn't know when Tiki was not a term. So I called it that. And the overall umbrella term is Polynesian Pop. And then there's pre-Tiki or tropical, and then there's Tiki. But I just explained to you why I called the book and the show Tiki Pop, and the same goes for this. 2/3 of the Catalina show are pre-Tiki because it deals with the 30s and 40s, And then the last third, beginning with, Kon-Tiki and stuff, is about how I always say pre-Tiki set the stage for the character of Tiki to appear on. Because it wouldn't have been as effective without pre-Tiki. It all led up to it. So it is connected, it leads to one thing led to the other.
Why do you think California seems to be the hotbed for Tiki?
Well, one of the reasons is certainly Hollywood. If you think about Don the Beachcomber being, now he's called, the godfather of Tiki, and it's like, yeah, he was really more pre-Tiki, but whatever. You can't. I'm not gonna be able to stem that tide, and people are not interested in these differentiation. That's for nerds like us. But especially on the East Coast, the mixology movement is what drove Tiki in the last decade or so. And the young mixologists, they don't want to hear about Don not being Tiki. He's their god, and it's all about the dawn of Tiki. And that's, you just have to go with that. Although to me it's also partially misinforming newbies when you see these book titles like Easy Tiki or Minimalist Tiki, and they should be called Easy Tiki Cocktails or Minimalist Tiki Cocktails, because that's what the books are about. But with the title, it was this Tiki now in mixology circles being short form for those kind of drinks that Beach Bomberry introduced again. It's a lot of newbies might pick up a book and they say, "Oh, I heard about Tiki. What is this? Oh, look, there's a book that says Easy Tiki. Oh, it's all about its cocktails," and it misses this whole genre of design and art, and that the thing that got me into it initially.
Yeah, I do think there's this, like, in regards to Don the Beachcomber, like, I think humans just like black and white answers, right? They don't like gray. So when we look back on history, we want to be able to assign, like, the godfather of Tiki. Like, that's something mentally in our brain. We need to just be able to say it was this person, even though
whose was first. And yeah, they don't like to differentiate, like I said, between pre-Tiki and Tiki. It's all Tiki now. So yeah, let's drink to that. Let's drink
to that
plantation Fiji rum.
I might actually open this and sip some rum with you. I've been drinking this cocktail.
Well, but you don't have my Sven.
Yes. I have a photo of this here, I believe. You can pull it up.
Yes.
This one right here, right?
That was the first color combination. And I took actually the design as a riff on a Don the Beachcomber glass with my sort of likeness on it. And I had McBiff do the design, and he did a great job because it's a really cool sort of like beatnik Tiki guy. And I needed sipping glasses. Oh yeah, there's the Don the Beach. See,
this is the original, right?
My very first. If you go to the left, the green mug, yeah, that was the first mug that came out for the Book of Tiki by Tiki Farm in 2001, I think, or 2002. So I had him transpose that likeness of myself as a Tiki likeness into the figure, and yeah, and I wanted to have sipping glasses. These glasses, this size, here is maybe better size comparison, are really hard to find even in thrift stores, because you either find shot glasses, which are not big enough, or everybody's making Mai Tai glasses now. So
or even these like snifter glasses. Like, this is a big glass.
That's fancy stuff. No. These glasses, just big enough for one ice cube if you like it with ice, and then you can sort of gauge your drinking, say like, "Oh, this is my third glass. Maybe I should stop now."
Or why? That's where those drink coins come in, right? You flip a drink coin. Can people get Sven's sipper?
Yeah, and right now only at my markets, because I'm such a damn artist. I hate packing and shipping and all that stuff, I wish I could have you guys on the East Coast get some, but you gotta have to make your own sipping glasses.
We'll have to use some of those Facebook groups that do pickups.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the marketplaces that you vend your wares at?
Anyone down here in Southern California. Well, I'm doing on this, is it Saturday or Sunday? I'm doing one at the Frogtown Brewery that Adrian Estacayo is organizing. Then I'm
Speaking of Polynesian Pop.
Yeah. Then I'm always doing the original Tiki Marketplace down at the Elks Lodge in Garden Grove. And I'm looking forward to Shipwrecked, that Danny Gallardo is doing at the warehouse. That might be the last, because it might close within a year. And then I'm doing Alohana in Palm Springs. I'll try to do all of them, because I think my cinematography career is petering out, and I have to figure out now, after everybody else is making money on Tiki, I have to. I had the luxury all this time to get cinematography jobs and pay my bills on that, and have Tiki as a hobby, but I gotta commercialize it a little bit.
I don't think people will complain if you go full-time Tiki Sven.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. People would love that. With that said, Sven, we have breached an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. That time went fast, but yes. Cheers to 22 years of the Book of Tiki.
Thank you, and cheers to this good rum.
Are you drinking the Plantation?
Yeah, the Fiji one. I like that one, but I love the fact. If you would ask me what's my favorite rum, I like the variety of it. It's just like with the cocktails. It's so great to have all these different. I have my home bar on the shelf there, and there's like 20 different bottles of rum, and I like to taste different ones all the time. And Plantation does a great job of doing these limited editions from all these different countries and different values, and some of them really valuable and I can't afford.
Those are the ones you hope that you get.
Yeah.
When you go over to someone's tiki bar and they bust out the old bottle of, like, Sven is here, let's get out the good Plantation. But kudos to a shout out to Martin Kate for helping people understand, because this is another thing in terms of education with alcohol, that rum has for a while played kind of second fiddle to whiskey. He's doing an excellent job at educating people about the vastness and diversity of rum.
Right.
I've got a mug to give away, Sven.
Oh, nice. It's a Tiki mug.
It's a Tiki. I knew. So we were having Sven Kirsten. I was like, it has to be a Tiki mug giveaway today.
Okay.
So we got this mug to give away. I have found the winner. They entered online. It's made by Rob, Tiki Rob, on the island of Maui. So,
cool.
Authentic Tiki mug with a special purple glaze interior.
I have my Catalina Tiki Tales mug here.
Ooh.
I have to be. Wait, what happens if I turn down?
Let me make you bigger here.
There. And it tells the story of the exhibition. From it looks kind of, the lighting is kind of flat, so you can't see the detail. But here, it's from book to film. The same motif is used on a film strip to bar, and here's the building that it becomes after it has been a book in a movie. So it's a storytelling mug.
Where can people get one of those?
That'll be available at the museum, Catalina Museum website when the big shipment of it comes in end of November, and also at Tiki Farm. Tiki Farm will have it on their website.
Tiki Farm is our other sponsor. They actually sponsor these giveaways. So we're sponsored 13 Nights of Tiki Frights by Plantation Rum and Tiki Farm. Thank you so much to Holden and the friends at Tiki Farm and Plantation Rum. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do all of these giveaways. And so with that said, Sven, I think we should give away a mug.
Okay.
I have the winner. Cheers to the winner before you know who it is.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers to Sven and the Book of Tiki.
Thank you.
And the mug winner is, it was pulled from Instagram this time, at Trader_Dukes. So congratulations, Trader Dukes. You have won a Tiki Rob mug, and everybody else hates you right now. But congratulations.
It's nice. It's a good one.
And with that said, Sven, so you got Tall Tiki Tales going on in
it's
Catalina.
A great excuse for people to visit Catalina for a weekend. It's on an island, in a Tiki exhibition on an island.
Right there it is. So check it out. And then you mentioned a number of places you're vending. They're going to have a mug through Tiki Farm and at the museum as well, right? But in limited quantities. And with that said, Sven, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I can talk about Tiki for hours, so I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you at the next Tiki event.
Okay. Thanks.
See you soon.
Bye.